Hi everyone, welcome back to another Reddit cheating story. Before we start, please hit the subscribe button and notification bell if you love to watch more cheating stories. My story. I met my now wife, a former wayward FWW, in 1999 when she was 19 and I was 23. We were each other's first intimate relationship and were married in 2003 in a big wedding in front of all our family members. Things by all accounts were good prior to us being married and for the first year or so. Very loving, very affectionate, and lots of shared great times. Neither of us thought in a million years that either of us would cheat on the other. After she graduated from college in 2004, a depression started to affect her. She was rejected by company after company that she applied to, and felt directionless, isolated and worthless. She would stay home while I had to go to work, with no friends or support structure nearby. She developed strong suicidal ideations, although never actually attempted anything. Meanwhile, I was finding a lot of fulfillment in the hobby/sport of motorcycle racing, and my time was spent more and more on this. I was concerned about my wife's depression, and was able to put in a good word for her at the company I worked for, which was in a large corporate environment. She interviewed in early 2005 and landed the job, which I thought would surely cure her of her situational depression. Things would soon be looking up, I thought. She was hired along with a male counterpart, around my same age and single, the future AP. They sat adjacent to each other and would interact regularly as a matter of their shared daily work. I myself sat in a cube just a few doors away from both of them, oblivious to the threat that was about to unfold. AP would playfully flirt with my wife, joking with her and making her laugh. He was just a nice guy, she thought. I met him a few times and thought nothing of it other than he was her coworker. Boundaries were incrementally crossed when my wife openly shared with him some personal information, something to the effect of that I was more interested in my motorcycle than in her. He would drop lines such as, "I wish I had a girlfriend like you and your husband is so lucky." My wife claims that she was so naive that she did not recognize any of these as signals that he was interested in her in a romantic/sexual way, but admits that they both grew more and more emotionally attached. After a few months of this emotional grooming, their boss sent them both on a business trip out of state. They sat next to each other on the plane, and during the flight, her AP initiated what was to be the start of the PA. He took her hand and held it. According to my wife, this was a big surprise and was the first overt indicator that he wanted to take things to the next level. My wife chose not to remove her hand, and by doing so, began the demolition of our marriage and started a chain of events that would forever alter our relationship. After arriving at their destination and meeting with colleagues, my wife and AP got on an elevator to go back up to their respective hotel rooms. Once the door had closed, AP moved over and kissed my wife. As she has described, it was a scene out of a pop romance movie. She again let this happen and went with it. AP then invited her into his room, where they continued to make out, and he took off his pants. As he started to take her pants off, she hesitated. She hadn't been expecting any of this to happen so fast, and wasn't psychologically ready to make that step, to his disappointment and mockery. There was, however, never a firm shutdown of this happening at a later point. They returned from the trip and my wife knew that she had crossed the line. In her mind, it was only a matter of time before I found out and would kick her out. There was no going back. About a week after the business trip, I was staying at work late to finish a big project. Her AP had invited her over to his place while I was working. By her account, she thought they would just talk or maybe make out again. Maybe talk about how it wasn't a good idea to continue things. Once she entered his bedroom, he ripped her panties off, held her arms down forcefully, and penetrated her. Her initial resistance gave way to willing participation. AP climaxed 3 separate times. She came once just from penetration alone, which is something I've never been able to do for her. They cuddled afterwards and then she drove home to me, oblivious as to what had just gone on. It was at this time that their secretive relationship accelerated. Sex on lunch breaks, weekends at his house while I was gone racing, and even him coming over to our apartment on one occasion to screw on our couch. On one occasion even having sex with both me and him on the same day. Her AP was in her ear all day, every day. Villainizing me and doing his best to convince her to leave me. I was the neglectful husband and completely dehumanized. He would love bomb her and she would find it irresistible. She claims she wasn't aware at all how shallow and generic his words were, as she had no previous romantic experience other than me. There were promises of a future together. There were gifts. There were lunchtime getaways to his place for sex. Even a weekly salsa dancing class they would both go to as I worked late. She compared our mature relationship to the excitement of a new relationship, and I was being tested without my knowledge. Every time I would fail to live up to AP in all areas. They began talking about how she would leave me and then start their relationship together in the open. One day, about a month or so after their PA started, my wife told me she wanted to move out to her own place once our lease was up on our apartment the following month. I was shocked, blindsided, and went into action mode. I had my complaints about our marriage, specifically that she wasn't supportive of my racing, and that she was too clingy and needed to find some hobby and friends so that I wasn't the only one who had to provide everything to her. She used this as the reason behind her moving out, so that she could learn to be more independent. I signed us up for marriage counseling and took her on an expensive 3-day weekend getaway, showering her with gifts and trying to talk her out of moving out. Still no clue about the affair, but by this time I had my suspicions. I asked repeatedly point blank if she was having an affair, and every time it was denied. There were many, many signs that I buried and chose to ignore. A few weeks before move-out day, her sister called me and begged me not to go racing that weekend at what was an important event for me. She had recently found out about my wife's affair. My FWW sister was furious at my FWW but wouldn't tell me out of loyalty to her sister. I ignored her sister's pleas, one of my many regrets. That weekend I had a big crash and broke my collarbone. The crash was a turning point for me, and I decided to give up racing for the time being to focus on trying to save my marriage. Move-out day came and went, and I was hit with the reality that this was all real. I think my wife also was hit by a sense of uncertainty and growing ambivalence that was a result of cracks in the facade of AP, but mixed with a sense of excitement fueled by her limerence for him. Her plan, I believe, was to choke our relationship to death, with moving out being the first step, followed by coming out with AP as a sort of rebound relationship. She's framed it today as a plan that her AP pushed her into. At this time, I was calling her and wanting to spend time with her whenever I could to soothe my deep sense of loneliness. She was the only one who could comfort me. I picked her up one day so we could go hang out at my new studio apartment and was telling her about how I wanted her back living with me so badly, that I was going to quit racing, and focus entirely on her and us, and she finally broke down. She confessed to the affair, and my immediate reaction was to tell her that I would forgive her and take her back on the condition that she stopped it. In some way, I was relieved, because I had finally gotten a diagnosis for what had been mysteriously eating away at our marriage. I remember she ran into the bathroom and texted her AP, "I love you no matter what happens, I guess she thought I may be a danger to her and those would be her last romantic words." D-Day was one of the most emotionally upsetting things I've ever lived through. My wife was surprised by my reaction, as she had thought this would be the end, and sounded open to try recovery. She went over to AP's house and tried to break it off with him, but he groveled, cried, and didn't allow her to leave without her agreeing to commit again to leaving me. Her ambivalence would grow every minute that she'd spend with him, and there was at one point an official agreement that we would deep it every time we'd talk more about it, she would change her mind. It was like being strung along on an emotional torture rack. I wanted to go to HR at work in hopes that they'd fire him so that they wouldn't be together anymore during the day, but I was unsure if my wife would just say that I was the one stalking them and that I'd end up being the one fired. If that happened, then I'd be more out of the picture than if I were to at least be sitting a few doors down. So then there was 2 months of tug-of-war between her AP and me to win the prize of my wife. I had to be the nice guy, and AP started doing a few things that made my wife second-guess him. He lied about getting an STD test so he could have unprotected sex with my wife, and also had told her this voluntarily, as well as telling her he would get prostitutes. He lied about being exclusive with her when she found out he had a second girlfriend on the side. He admitted that he had previously been charged with rape. He would go around town stealing bicycles and openly bragged about this. He lied about his race to get into a prestigious college. He wanted to defile our marital bed by having sex with my wife in it. This guy's character was the lowest of the low, but somehow he would manage to put just the right string of words together that would convince my wife that it was all okay and normal. He was also losing patience with my wife, and started dating a new girl openly in an attempt to make my wife jealous. Finally, once I sensed that my wife would be likely to take my side in any fallout at work, I went to HR, and the decision was to terminate the AP. At this point, AP realized that my wife had finally chosen sides. He packed his stuff up and left, and according to her, they never spoke again. We stayed married, and the following year bought a house together. The next year, we got pregnant. We then moved out of state for a job I took, and had 2 more kids. We are now 16 years post D-Day. I've gone long periods of time without thinking about it, but sometimes I re-trigger and have negative thoughts that I battle to this day. Now, up until this point, I've been the victim. But the shoe has also been on the other foot. I became addicted to porn, and it led me to eventually seek out escorts and massage parlors to deal with my emotions and everything being unfair. I kept my addiction a secret for 4 years until one day my wife found out. She was devastated, and in her mind it confirmed all of her deep-seated fears about being undesired and unattractive, which was partly what had made her vulnerable to have an affair in the first place. I didn't know if she would forgive me, but after agreeing to go to therapy and SA, she gave me another chance like I gave her one. It's been over 5 years now since I last saw an escort. She also dealt with me not being interested in sex at all with her for years while I directed all my sexual energy elsewhere. She believed that I had become asexual. Today, we are in a much better position in our marriage, but it's scarred with our past mistakes. What does this say about us as a couple that we are still together? I know most people would be out the door in both cases. We are two imperfect people who refuse to give up on each other. Here are some of the best comments from our community. Yep. Not for me at all. Like, I'm glad for you, but. Yeah, no. I would have been out of the door way before this. This marriage should have never happened in the first place. No, I believe you are the one who refused to give up. If you wouldn't have went to HR on the guy, I'd be willing to bet this would have went in an entirely different direction. No one is perfect, and I give you credit for sticking around. I knew immediately I couldn't and wouldn't. You seem to take every opportunity possible in your story to portray your wife as somehow helpless and not responsible for her actions in a very long affair that involved deceiving you for a long time. Everything was the AP's fault, not that she made years of conscious decisions to screw you over. I think the reality of how she dealt with you not being interested in sex for years after your reconciliation will make an interesting update to your story whenever you find out the actual truth. Others guys having a crack at married women when they are most vulnerable are the scum of the earth. No excuse for the women either to have not crossed the line. Well, that's life, live and learn, and plan for the future. When the kids are gone, something have to fill that space. You guys are for the long run, so time is on your side. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell.